Hello, today I'm talking about how to buy property in Puglia, but the same rules apply all over Italy, without blowing your budget. Some of which may seem to be obvious, but I just see so many people who get carried away, and so the willing suspension of disbelief thing really works. And then they come a cropper afterwards. So first of all, you need to get an idea of what the kind of property you want is going to cost. Um, and basically looking up, Googling like mad what property cost should cost per square meter in a particular town or area isn't helpful because the way those statistics are done, it's all property that was sold in that area. So that include things that are falling down. It will include things that have planning issues. It will include things that are very different from what you're looking for. Obviously, a character property in a historic centre is going to cost more than a flat in an ugly modern tower block. But the average price will reflect all of those possibilities. So, better idea is to look on one of the main estate agent sites like immobiliare.it or idealista.it and work out more or less what things cost in that area. But again, a caveat there is that in an area where that's very popular, where there isn't that much property for sale at the moment, it may be what's left. And the reason why it's property prices seem lower is because actually most of the properties for sale do have something wrong with them because the good ones have been snapped up. And so that's something also to be aware of. The other thing is that if something is significantly lower than what seems to be the going rate for that area, it may well have planning permission issues, which is a really expensive mistake to make. You could end up, for example, buying a five-bedroom property, well, five-room property, and two of the rooms have been added without planning permission um, since 1942 in historic centres or since the 60s outside of that. Um, and so something might look like it's always been there, but in fact, you buy the property and you immediately have the cost of doing the demolition of those rooms. And you end up with a smaller property than you wanted. Um, if you don't do the demolition and you get found out, there are huge fines, which is another kind of unexpected expense. But also, you will have difficulty reselling, and you won't be able to rent out, and you won't be able to do any work because you won't get permission for any work until you put right the historic planning issues. So that's something also to be aware of. There are bargains to be had, um, but just be careful. The other thing is obviously, and this is a kind of no-brainer, you could probably work this out for yourselves, but is work out what the cost of purchase is going to be. 10% is a reasonable rule of thumb, but bear in mind if you're buying something and you're not going to establish residence in the first 18 months, the property tax will be 9% of the catastral value, with notary fees and things on top. The estate agent will charge you at least 3% of the purchase price in commission. Some agencies charge more. Almost all agencies cap. So if a property is under 100,000, you're still going to end up paying three and a half, 4,000 commission, which is more than 3%, obviously. Don't make the mistake of um, thinking that you're better off buying something from a private seller, because usually the only reason things are not with an agent is because they've got something wrong with them. And the buyer knows perfectly well that an agency either won't take the property on or may feel honor bound to tell people what's wrong with the property. So that's something else to be aware of. The other thing is that pictures are deceptive. So the fact that a property has been lived in recently, and had a recent coat of paint doesn't mean it doesn't need any work. Because if it hasn't been rewired and replumbed in the last 10 years, That's going to need doing, which means then doing floors, replastering walls, and so on. Same applies if you just want to move kitchens and bathrooms or add a bathroom or that kind of thing as well. I'm not saying that if it hasn't been rewired or replumbed in the last 10 years, you have to do it, but you do if you want to rent out, because you need to have plumbing and wiring that's up to spec in order to get the council registration number to rent out. All of the main sites like Airbnb and Booking.com ask for that registration now. And you could rent out privately and not use the main portals, but they are really cracking down. So if you're caught doing it, you will get huge fines, which is another kind of unexpected expense. So again, something to be wary of. And also, you might think you can do all of the work yourself. You've restored a property from scratch in your home country. In Italy, it's not that easy. There isn't a big culture of DIY, and anything other than painting and maybe tiling, um, you can't do yourself because you need permission to do it, and you'll only get permission if you use registered plumber, electrician, builder, and so on. So, um, yeah, something to think about beforehand rather than find out afterwards. The other thing as well is basically that so you need to know what the work's going to cost before you buy the property, unless it's fully restored, in which case, fine. Um, how do you do that? I wouldn't ask the estate agent what they think the work will cost and take their word for it. Um, because if you're being charitable, it's not their job. They're not experts. They don't know. If you're being cynical about it, then they will underestimate anyway because they want you to buy the property. So I would always get a builder to look at the property, having already a clear idea of what work you want to do, and also an idea of measurements as well. And that will give you a much better idea of what the work's likely to cost. If you don't do those things and you just buy the property and then start looking for quotes and how much the work is going to do once you already own the property, what's going to happen is that you are going to find yourself in a position where it's more than you thought, and you will be posting all over expat groups saying, "Help! People are trying to rip me off because I'm a foreigner." And yeah, no, you're an idiot. You should have worked it out before you bought the property. And it's not that work's expensive here, particularly. It's just that, particularly with character properties, they're high ceilings, so there are a lot of square meters, and prices are usually per square meter. So it's just something to be aware of, and not to underestimate. For example, I'm doing a property at the moment where the work is costing twice as much as the purchase price. The same again would be normal. Not because it's falling down, not because it's got any structural issues, but just because it's a big property. So it's a lot of square meters. So you actually sort of need to be aware of that as well. The other thing is the other reason why you might want to replumb and rewire, is that typically, historically, the last 50 years, most houses have gas central heating. And the cost of mains gas now is prohibitive. So even if you don't spend the money up front in terms of updating the heating system, um, you'll pay it. You'll pay it in bills. And anyway, there is a lot of talk about gas boilers being outlawed completely. So again, it's just something that you need to be aware of. I help clients on a consultancy basis. I quite often just go and look at properties for people and say, look, I think it's going to cost this to restore. Obviously, I'm not a builder either, but I have been restoring properties for 17 years here. So I'm usually not far off. So if you do all of these things, you shouldn't have any nasty surprises afterwards. and obviously assuming you've also had an engineer look at the property and make sure that there are no structural issues. So I think, yeah, I mean, if you're careful, you should be absolutely fine. Um, you may be lucky and get an absolute bargain, um, but it's by no means a given. And obviously, you avoid some of these problems by buying somewhere that's already been restored. But well-restored properties are in short supply, so you might end up, even if you don't initially plan on buying something that needs some work, on buying something that that needs some work. Um, so lots of food for thought. I'll put some links to possibly useful articles in the comments below, but also there is another video on paying the right price for work in the series, which you should probably have a look at before you start trying to work out what work will cost. So I hope this is useful. Thanks for listening and good luck.